We're going to be talking about radicals today, or roots, as you might know them. So let's do a warm up here. So if I said, what is the square root of 9? And the square root of 9, you can put into the calculator, and the square root of 9 is 3. Now, technically, as you may or may not have learned previously, it's really plus or minus 3. Because square root means what multiplied by itself gives you 9. And the thing that and 3 plus 3 times 3 is 9. But also negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9. So both of those are acceptable roots of 9. For this group of lessons, we're going to assume we're actually not going to consider the negative root. So we're going to assume that the roots are always positive, and we're going to play around with stuff in that way. So we have the square root of 25, the square root of 49, the square root of 20. So the square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 is 25. And the square root of 49 is 7, because 7 times 7 is 49. And the square root of 20, it's hard to do in my head, square root of 20 is 4.47213. Oh boy, it is a big mess. Right, it's about 4.7 or something. So our goal for today is going to be, our first goal at least, is going to be to turn this into something that's less of a big mess. So we're going to have two rules. So we're going to have our general rules. We're going to say that the square root of AB is the square root of A times the square root of B. And we're going to say that C root A times D root B is, we're going to multiply the C and the D, and we're going to multiply times the square root of A times B. And those would be the two main rules, and we're going to kind of keep those in mind as we go through these things. So, the examples, let's go for example 1. So what we're going to do is, we're going to have something called an entire radical and a mixed radical. And then when I say simplify, I'm going to sometimes use the word simplify. And simplify means usually going in this direction. So simplify means going from an entire radical to a mixed radical. Now, what's the difference between the two? I'll show you. So let's say, for example, let's go with that root 20. So root 20 is the same thing as root 4 times 5, because 4 times 5 is 20, which is the same thing as the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, using this rule over here. The square root of something times something is the square root of the first thing times the square root of the second thing. So the square root of 4 times 5 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. The square root of 4 is one of those pretty ones, so that's going to be 2 times the square root of 5. And what we're going to say is, we're going to say that this thing over here is an entire radical, and this thing over here is a mixed radical. And it's mixed because part of it is a radical. That means it has the Rudy sign around it. And part of it is not a radical, so it doesn't have the Rudy sign. So it's a mix, right? It has some of one and some of another. And so root 20 simplifies into 2 root 5. Now, picking 4 root 5, it's important to, you can't just randomly break things up. So for example, let's say I had root 20 and I said, okay, root 20 is the square root of 2 times the square root of 10, which is root 2 times root 10. And root 2 is a mess. And root 10 is also a mess. And so that doesn't help at all. So it's actually just a big mess. So when we broke it up into 4 and 5, it worked because 4 was one of the pretty ones. And so the pretty ones, of course, are going to be essentially the ones that are squares. So root 4, root 9, root 16, root 25, root 36, root 49. Those are all the nice ones. And so you want to, usually when you're breaking up the numbers, you want to break it up in so that one of them is one of these numbers. Otherwise, turning root 20 into root 2 times root 10 does not work. I mean, it works, but it's not exciting.